Absolute, undiluted hell. The last few hours for David Jenkins had been nothing but pain and disbelief. An anonymous email message stated that his beloved wife of 6 years, Lauren, had been seen entering a room at a cheap motel the previous Wednesday afternoon, and that she was now having lunch with the same man again. To say David was shocked would be a gross understatement. He and Lauren were deeply in love, having sex 3 to 5 times a week, and their lovemaking was usually intense and sincere. He was not yet 30. Still, he couldn't ignore the email or its implications. So, feeling more tense and nervous than he had ever been in his life, he drove home that day, a changed man. Arriving home around 6 p.m., as usual, he saw Lauren's car already in the driveway. Still in her work clothes, she was standing at the sink, rinsing vegetables. When he entered the kitchen, greeted him hesitantly, and set down his briefcase. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" Lauren dried her hands on a towel before turning to kiss him. David was amazed at how carefree Lauren was after spending the day with another man. "Great. But there was some bad news this afternoon regarding a project we're working on, and it looks like I'll have to go to Greensboro on Friday, so I won't be home until 8 p.m., depending on how the meetings go, and then I'll go home." David knew Lauren's work schedule pretty well, and he knew that her schedule was most flexible on Wednesday and Friday afternoons. So his first thought on how to verify the allegations in this email was to make it even easier for Lauren on the upcoming Friday. The project crisis, the meeting, and the business trip were all lies, and instead he agreed to take Friday off and do some preliminary work, as well as look after a motel for Lauren and her lover. "Well, at least you don't have to stay the night, and we can still spend the whole weekend together," Lauren suggested. "Since you really can't predict when you'll get home, could you call me when you leave Greensboro? I'll try to prepare as best I can for dinner." David thought for a moment. Yesterday, he wouldn't have noticed or even thought how considerate Lauren had been in trying to make dinner together possible despite his unplanned business trip. Now he wondered if she had asked him to give her a 2-hour period to cover her legs and remove the traces of her lover. "Of course, I'll call you when I have a better idea of when I can leave Greensboro, and I'll also call you from the road when I have a better idea of what time I'll be home." Fine, because the point of Friday now was to make it easier for Lauren to cheat again if it really was her at the motel. And if this email was accurate, David wanted Lauren to feel comfortable knowing that he would have no way of catching her. "David, I'm going to make dinner and then take a quick shower. Could you keep an eye on this frying pan while I'm gone? Make sure the vegetables don't burn," Lauren asked, taking her purse and taking it upstairs. "Of course, honey, don't worry," David replied, meanwhile thinking to himself, "That's strange, I thought she usually left her purse downstairs." The shower itself also made him think. While it wasn't uncommon, she usually didn't shower immediately upon returning home, so as he checked his mail and stirred his vegetables, he nervously wondered if the accidental shower had anything to do with the news in the email he'd received earlier. Screw my life, David thought. One anonymous email, and I'm questioning everything about my marriage that I thought was absolutely wonderful until today. At dinner, David was clearly thoughtful. "Anything else wrong, honey? Besides the project you were talking about? You seem awfully quiet and almost on another planet," Lauren finally asked, having received a terse answer to a couple of questions she had asked. "No, sorry. I guess I'm just tired, and also already thinking about what I need to do tomorrow to be ready to head to Greensboro on Friday." David knew he needed to act normal so as not to make Lauren think anything was unusual. David found it almost funny. What is considered normal now? My wife could be cheating on me, or I could be picked on by someone with a shitty sense of humor, or I could be the unintentional victim of a bad email address. What if it was a completely different woman and the sender mistook her for my wife? To hell with this life. Yesterday I was confident in my happiness, and today I am a fucking wreck of doubts. Dinner was cleared up, and after watching TV for a while, David and Lauren talked about plans for the weekend and eventually began getting ready for bed. David had already said that he was going to bed early because he had to go to work early to prepare for the trip. David's stomach knotted at the thought of what he would do if Lauren made any moves about sex tonight. He thought about Wednesday nights and whether there had been a pattern to their sex lately, and realized with horror that his recollection was that it was about 50-50. Connecting it with her shower after work, he felt in the dark, trying to pinch the tail of a two-faced donkey. Lauren got into bed first, and when David joined her, she quickly snuggled up behind him, hugged him tightly, and reached up to scratch his chest with her nails. "Can I take you away from work for 30 minutes, my love?" Lauren suggested playfully. Crap, David thought. How much more can I take before I lose control? He patiently stuck to plan A and said, "As much as I would like it, my dear, I won't be of much use to you today or tomorrow. I'm just too distracted by this project hanging over me." As he said this, he again couldn't believe how much his life had changed in the 60 seconds it took to read and understand that simple email he had received just 10 hours ago. "It's okay, honey, I understand. I just thought if you're up for it, I'd offer you some well-deserved stress relief." Lauren hugged David tightly and kissed the back of his head before saying goodnight and rolling over. David was relieved at the same time. What did she mean by, "if you're ready for it"? "Fuck my life." David got up and left for work before Lauren woke up, so he avoided further questions or piercing glances. He realized how poorly he dealt with a problem, real or imagined. Last night reminded him of Poe's treacherous heart, and with that realization, he knew he had to avoid another night of close contact with Lauren. "Hey, honey, I'm going to be working late tonight, getting ready for my trip and meetings tomorrow, so don't worry about dinner for me, and I'll see you probably before bed." David left in her voicemail around noon. However, Thursday was spent without preparing for business meetings. David was a planner and organizer by nature and by profession, so even though he didn't have the hard facts of her infidelity, he wanted to organize everything. He called everyone until he found a lawyer who could meet with him the next day and search the internet for recording devices. After deciding what he wanted to buy, he looked around town for some local stores that had similar devices and found a store he would stop by before heading home. David is competent enough at his actual job that no one asks him what's going on, but his heart and mind were clearly elsewhere. He was a little late from work and then went to a store that sold eavesdropping equipment and bought a simple voice-activated pen that he thought he could hide in Lauren's purse, which was usually with her in her office and car. He also brought work home to pretend he was getting ready for a trip the next day before Lauren went to bed. "Hi, darling. I'm so glad you're finally home," Lauren said, walking to the door when David arrived around 9 p.m. "How is the project and trip going?" "I think it's not bad. Since we learned about these new issues, we have allocated more resources to this, so I hope that everything will be resolved on Friday, for better or worse." This is playing with fire, David thought, for better or for worse. I wonder if she feels the same way now. Thursday night, to David's relief, was a repeat of the previous night, only with cuddles. To her credit, Lauren seemed completely unfazed and, as far as David could tell, acted the same way towards him as before. Relatively speaking, however, he was such a complete wreck that it probably wasn't difficult for Lauren to appear normal in comparison to David. On Friday, getting up again at dawn, David checked the pen, put it in Lauren's purse, and left the house. He killed some time at the coffee shop and then went to meet his lawyer at 10 a.m. David considered this meeting solely to obtain information, but in the end, he really liked the lawyer. They discussed David's email and his still unconfirmed fears, as well as the fact that today was a date with a potential lover, which David was going to check out himself. He admitted that he had nothing but that damn email, so going all in on a private investigator or thousands of dollars of electronic surveillance equipment didn't make much sense. From a lawyer, David learned about the formulaic reality of divorce, for that matter. Without children, a no-fault divorce was relatively simple, especially since David and Lauren earned comparable salaries and had similar retirement plan balances. The house was largely in debt, so liquidating it would be more of an emotional shock than a financial strain. However, David left the law office in complete confusion. How can I even feel this nightmare and think it won't be that bad? We were meant to be together forever until death do us part. David spent lunch at Starbucks surfing the internet and continuing to research what is called divorce. Websites are replete with information on how to spot a cheating spouse, how to avoid detection when cheating, how to hide income, and how to find it. The most instructive sites were those dedicated to why spouses cheat. Nothing. David read struck a chord with Lauren's motivation. This fact alone was probably why David, deep down, hoped that it was all a mistake. Lauren couldn't cheat on him. They were too close, too much in love, too in sync with each other for it to be true. When he could no longer talk about the topic of deception, he packed his things and left, heading to the motel. Time passed slowly, or so it seemed to David. As he drove to the motel mentioned in that damn email, he realized that if this whole affair thing was indeed true, then it was entirely possible that Lauren didn't always use the same motel. If that were true, then his entire day might have been in vain, and he wouldn't have known anything for sure anyway. The pen he had placed in her purse might eventually bear some fruit, but David knew he could no longer bear this uncertainty about the state and future of his marriage. Pulling into the motel parking lot at 1:40 p.m., he drove around until he found a remote parking spot that overlooked most of the rooms and the office. Now he must just wait. There weren't many people coming and going at the motel, so when the man parked the late model Acura, visited the office, and then entered the room on the first floor, he seemed vaguely familiar to David. The name didn't come to mind, but David thought he had seen this man before. All of David's doubts ended, as did his hopes, about 5 minutes later when Lauren's Honda Accord parked next to the Acura, and she jumped up, purse in hand, walked to the door of the same room and knocked quickly. A few seconds later, the man opened the door and Lauren stepped inside with her usual ease and confidence. To hell with my life. It's all true, David thought, pounding the steering wheel with his fists. How could Lauren do this to us? And why? There was simply no rhyme or reason to it. David had never felt so blind in his life. The planner and organizer just pulled the rug out from under him. David's thoughts were racing left, right, up and down, like the new Fury roller coaster at Carowinds. And he suddenly realized that he was now sharing a crumbling share in a marriage in complete and dire crisis. Knowing that today was at least the second instance of Lauren cheating, and the fact that she was avoiding work to do it, made David feel like there was nothing more to be gained. Hanging around at the motel, he had no intention of confronting them by knocking on the door. This could get nasty, and he needed time and space to calm down and prepare for whatever his next steps were. His lack of faith up to this point had left him woefully unprepared emotionally for his next steps. Then he remembered the pen he had put in her purse and winced bitterly. Sound in real time, he thought with pain. It's just great. He had the presence of mind to take a few photos of the two cars parked side by side in front of their love nest, and he took a close-up of the man's car, which had a license plate, before slowly turning to the exit and returning to the road. He didn't have a destination in mind, but he just drove aimlessly for a while until he nearly ran a red light and was almost hit. This shocked him, so he stopped at a brewery and drank a beer, trying to collect his thoughts. At first, he thought he had just gone from idle suspicion to full awareness, but he realized how little he knew at the moment, and he had no idea who this guy was, how long it had been going on, and, more importantly, why. As far as he knew, for over 7 years he and Lauren had been exclusive, got engaged, and then got married. He had enough evidence to counter, but not enough to know if what Lauren would answer would be true. As much as it pained him to listen to the recording of this afternoon's date, he knew he had to wait to get the pen out of her purse before he said anything to Lauren. He also knew that he couldn't be around his crush Lauren if she was in the mood to have sex with him later, after his supposed business trip. He'd been pushing her away this week, citing the trip, so his ready excuse would have disappeared, and further refusal to have sex with Lauren would likely have heightened her awareness that something was wrong. So what to do? I need this pen, then I need to quickly confirm that there is something on it, and then I could leave the house and stay for a few days to figure out where I stand in all this crap, David scribbled in his mind. With this general plan in mind, David had an insidious thought. She thought I would be arriving later than usual tonight. So that I can shake her and her lover up, I need to call with the news that I'm almost home. After finishing his beer and paying the bill, he drove the car back onto the road and dialed Lauren's cell phone number. He wrote a voice message. "Hi, honey, great news. The prep work paid off big time, and everyone did a great job getting everything back on track, so I'm about 30 minutes from Charlotte, and the traffic isn't too bad. I should be home around the usual time. I hope this scares the crap out of her, you fucking tramp," David said out loud to himself. He headed towards the house, and upon arrival, he quickly packed a couple of bags and placed them in the trunk of his car. He then sat down and wrote a note to Lauren. Depending on how the night had gone, he wanted to be able to just escape without much confrontation. He didn't know what was on the tape, so he didn't want a full-scale confrontation just yet. Part of his reasoning was also to stun her as much as she stunned him. When David called Lauren, she and her lover Rob were in the final throes of having sex for the second time that day. Today was their last day together, and thanks to the extra runway David's ride had given them, they made their second go-around for the first time. They had also seen it as a celebration or victory dance, but now it seemed like a potentially careless move. Listening to the voicemail message, she muttered, "Shit, I need to move, Rob." It was David, who said that he was already heading back and would be home around 6 p.m. as usual. "Well, at least you got the early warning phone call he promised you," Rob joked back as Lauren hugged him and said goodbye, then quickly ran to the bathroom to take a shower. Routine and habits took over. Rob got dressed and left the room while Lauren took a shower. He was heading to the gym for his standard post-coital and shower workout. On the way home, Lauren was more concerned about David's early return home and his joyful mood about the project taking a turn for the better. "I thought he'd be home late and probably burnt out from meetings and travel, but he'd probably want to make love tonight after missing most of the week," she thought as she turned into their neighborhood. Still a little nervous, she turned the corner, approached her house, and saw David's car already in the driveway. "Holy crap, he did well in Friday traffic," she muttered out loud, parking his Accord next to his new civilian. Lauren thought he might want to pounce on her as soon as she entered. She thought that maybe a preemptive offer of a nice holiday dinner might be a good idea. David was on pins and needles when he heard Lauren's car in the driveway. This would be the first time he had seen her since he knew for sure that she was a cheating cheater. Bags packed and in the car, a note prepared. All he needed was a pen to write. He sat in the living room so he could catch Lauren as soon as she arrived. "Hi, darling," Lauren exclaimed as she walked in and saw David getting up from his chair. "Looks like everything went well." "Why don't we go out to eat and celebrate?" she asked him as they hugged and kissed each other. "That sounds great since I got home early. Why don't you go upstairs and change while I book a table somewhere?" David suggested. Lauren readily agreed and tossed her work bag and purse onto the table before walking up the stairs to the master bedroom. David waited until he heard the shower start, then went to her purse and pulled out a pen. He pressed rewind and then played, heard the lovers begin to talk, and quickly turned off the knob. "Well, that settles it all. It's time to get out of here." And David took out his note for Lauren and left it on the table next to her bags. Pausing in the doorway, David looked back at their house, sadly realizing that nothing would ever be the same between him and her. Lauren hurried to the shower. She suggested that he might be hungry after the trip and might also want to have sex later. Not seeing him in the living room, she headed to the kitchen and saw a note lying on the table. Taking it and starting to read, she gasped, "No, God, no, this can't be true. Lauren, I know about your lover and your affair. I couldn't believe it was true, but your afternoon date at the motel put all doubts to rest. You crushed my soul, and I am so sad and angry that I cannot be near you. I'll be gone for a night or two while I try to collect my thoughts, and then I'll call you to set up a time to talk. Don't try to contact me or find me. Trust me when I say I shouldn't see you until I'm ready. David." David left the house and went to the hotel. Once settled in his room, he ate dinner downstairs, ordered a double scotch on the rocks, and then reluctantly returned to the room to listen to the recording of Lauren's afternoon betrayal of their marriage vows. Sitting in a chair by the desk, he turned on the recorder and heard the following sound as soon as Lauren entered the room. Lauren. "Hi, Rob. I can't believe we're already done with this, both in terms of meetings and in terms of time. I didn't think that we would so easily hold at least 5 meetings, and even within 30 days. Rob. Hi, Lauren. Yes, I thought it would take longer. We spent much more time planning and preparing than executing. I guess this is the result of good planning, yes? I believe. I have to say, I'm glad it's over. The stress of hiding our affair is getting to me, and I understand why long-term affairs usually lead to disastrous outcomes. Yes, it's the same here. I know my wife has no idea, but I can see how this could easily stop over time. You said David wouldn't be in town until late tonight, right? I was thinking that we could have a drink today to celebrate our success and finish with a bang, so to speak. Haha, that was pretty lame, Rob. I'm kind of in favor, but the rules are the rules, so we don't do anything new that wasn't on the list. Lauren and Rob undressed, and David heard kissing and soft moans coming from Lauren. David heard the bed creak. David listened to all 90 minutes of illicit sex between Lauren and Rob. 2 things struck him. First, the sex seemed normal, even ordinary, and David couldn't imagine why Lauren would risk her marriage for the same thing. Rob used condoms during intercourse, and nothing they did was outlandishly erotic. And secondly, none of them humiliated or defamed their spouses. David knew the affair was real. They had dated 5 times, but he still had no idea about the why behind it. Friday night was mostly sleepless for both David and Lauren. Eventually, David gave up and realized there was nothing more to gain from the recording. Deciding to take advantage of the weekend and freedom from work, he wrote to Lauren, "I'll come to your house at 11 a.m. to talk, if that's okay with you." Lauren grabbed her phone as she heard an incoming message ping. "Yes, please come home. I'm so sorry I hurt you." David didn't pay attention to Lauren's answer. Arriving shortly before 11 a.m., David trudged to the front door and rang the doorbell. Lauren opened the door. "David, you don't have to call your own house." "I didn't feel comfortable just going in," David replied. "Can we sit down at the kitchen table and discuss next steps?" Lauren was unhappy with David's business-like behavior and the way this discussion was unfolding. Sitting across the table from each other, time stood still for a moment before David cleared his throat and asked a question that shook Lauren to her core. "Are you denying in any meaningful way that I have learned of your activities with Rob?" Lauren teared up and thought about David's question and how focused and matter-of-fact he was. This conversation, in her opinion, should have been aimed at making David understand that nothing she did changed her feelings for him, and that she and Rob had this affair only to prove the wrongness of their work colleagues. David only knew about the meaningless sex and nothing about the conversations at Lauren's work that led to Rob and Lauren's plan to prove their friends wrong. "David, before we go any further, you must first understand that Rob and I only did this to prove that we could have an affair without anyone knowing about it. A few months ago, many of us at work were discussing affairs and how they are almost always discovered, as well as the tragic turmoil they cause in marriages. The debate was divided into 2 camps. Some thought that all cases beyond the scope of a one-night stand would certainly be solved. Others thought that keeping more than one-night stand a secret would require some planning and, of course, a fair amount of deception. But it could be done. Rob and I got into the last camp and then talked about what precautions would be necessary. Wait a second, are you saying it was just an experiment or a game? Just to see if you can have an affair that goes unnoticed? Yes, in fact, that's all. It's just that talking about it has become a game. The hypotheses we laid out over a few lunches just took on a life of their own, and eventually we laid it out in pretty good detail, and we were convinced we could pull it off. But that was the rub. To truly succeed would mean that not a single soul could or would ever know what we have achieved. Long story short, we decided to test our plan, fully aware that Rob loved his wife as much as I love you, and that this game, if you will, meant nothing as far as our relationship was concerned. It was just sex, and one of our conditions for the test was that it had to last at least 30 days, and we had to meet at least 5 times. But it was just sex, David. We don't love each other at all. We love our spouses. We purposefully didn't do anything sexual that we didn't share with our partners, and it never took anything away from our spouses. What do you mean nothing was taken from me? I used to have a faithful wife, but now I don't. Yes, I suppose now that you know it's true. But if you never knew about it, you would believe that I am faithful. In my heart, it was meaningless sex. And during this entire month, if you wanted sex after Rob and I were together, I never turned you down. Great, Lauren. Sloppy seconds, and no harm done. I feel really warm and fuzzy now. Look, I know you're hurt, and you must feel terrible about what you found out, and I'm truly sorry for hurting you. But I hope that the details I have shared can dispel any doubts about my love for you and erase any thoughts about my feelings for Rob. He's just a co-worker I had sex with, but that's all it was. No love, no feelings. It's only because you know it's a terrible thing right now. Rob and we were very careful, and we were confident that we would never be discovered, and we would never have thought that it would cause any harm to our marriages. Okay, so it's a long story to basically admit that you cheated on me for a month, fucked a man who wasn't your husband about 5 times, and fully intended to keep the affair a secret from me, your husband, until the end of our life together. Returning to my main question, I assume you are not denying any of the disgusting facts that I have learned about your activities with Rob? Lauren sank a little at the repeated direct attack on her excuses. Yes, I suppose the facts are what they are. But the reasons must matter to them. It was just sex. And it wasn't even sex, generated by attraction to each other. There was no lust between us. We just needed sex to prove that we could hide the affair. Sex was meaningless for each of us. David was torn between thinking that Lauren must have swallowed a bottle of stupid pills last month and wondering if she had always held such crazy beliefs. It doesn't seem like there's much passion between you two. That's it, David. There was no passion. It was just sex. I know you're hurt, but I'm ready to do anything to make amends. Wait, this is still bullshit. This whole, it was just sex, excuse is nonsense, and you should know it very well. We talked about being faithful when we decided to be exceptional. We discussed this at length when we talked about marriage. We dated exclusively for almost a year, and we spoke again before I proposed. We specifically promised fidelity to each other during premarital counseling and in our damn wedding vows. I don't recall a single mention of the "it was just sex" excuse. Lauren saw that there was no point in arguing with their story. David, you're right. We did discuss fidelity at length. The point I'm trying to make is that we are on the same page where it matters, meaning our love for each other. I've only loved you for the last 7+ years and never for 1 second had the slightest feelings for Rob. If playing Yahtzee with Rob 5 times in a month could make a difference, we would. It was just sex, but sex was necessary to carry out the secret affair. It was more like it was all the stupid pills' fault, and then David jumped on what Lauren had just said. So why didn't you just play Yahtzee? Or should you have just played backgammon? Or just do some other damn thing other than just sex? You made it clear that you didn't have to have sex with Rob, and you also said that no other soul would ever know about this affair, so you could do something else in that hotel room that would look and smell like an affair. Mission accomplished, right? To prove that you were capable of having an affair, you didn't actually have to have sex. You still had to hide your activities from your spouses, so there was some blame involved. You were leaving work early anyway, so you would still have to hide it. It didn't really matter, with or without sex.
Lauren's head lolled to the side as she considered David's challenge, and she felt herself sinking quickly and deeply. Lauren couldn't think of any other excuse to overcome his assumption. Since no one will ever know, it didn't really matter whether Rob and Lauren had sex or not. To win their little, unannounced bet, they just had to play out the affair with all the necessary secrets and meetings in hotels. So why did she actually have sex? I don't know, David. I never thought about this aspect of secrecy. We planned a secret affair to see if we could do it. Then we decided to test our plan. We were just expected to go all the way to the end. Lauren, all day today, you've been using the word just to minimize what you've done, the same way you say, just a second, or just a little, when in fact what you've done is seriously damaging. Damage, and it's the worst thing either of us could do to our marriage. The fact that you don't see it yourself is probably worse than the fact that you fuck another man 5 times in a month. Hell, you almost feel like you've only fucked him 5 times, so it's no big deal. Well, this is very important to me, and at the moment we haven't gotten anywhere, so I'm leaving for now.
David left, returning to the hotel. On Monday, he canceled work and began to think through Lauren's arguments. He couldn't believe that she thought so little of her loyalty that she would cast it aside to win a phantom bet against work colleagues who knew nothing. It's all a game to her. I've had enough, David thought to himself. I could sit here and agonize and try to find some explanation for her actions, but there is none. It wasn't just sex. It was a betrayal of her commitment to him. Her precious vows to keep those commitments to him forever, until death do us part. What ultimately amazed David most was that, as terrible as his final decision was, he felt surprisingly at ease with it. He felt better than he ever had, since he received that damn email. Not losing hope, Lauren readily agreed to another meeting the next day. "What is this?" Lauren asked, quickly looking through a stack of papers. "It's just a scam," David replied. "Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one.